All right, so we're back with roofs. So if everybody remembers, this is where we left off with massing. Um, and really, there's a couple of different ways that I want to talk about roofing. Like a lot of this is going to be repeating stuff that we have previously talked about, but just to get it all here and recorded. Uh, so if remember from last time we were talking, there's the first basic way is what I call design roofs, where you're really just trying to create uh, kind of more of a massing roof that can help you understand what kind of design you want to do. So really, this is what you would do if you don't have a specific idea of what you want. You don't have a wall section necessarily. Like you're really just still in the very early stages, and that's what. Okay, let me check something. So that's what I really like about SketchUp is you can either be as super precise as you want to be, or you can let this simply be pen and paper so that you can figure out what you want things to be. So we'll start with the very basic roof, as if we don't really know the complete style, we don't really know a lot of things, but we just want to start getting the concept of the roof down, and that's really what we focus on in design in this firm is roofs, of how we can make a roof much nicer than what the geometry is telling us it should be. So I'm going to start here with this triangle, and I just literally have this line here to show me where to be consistent of where I would hit my edge of wall. Uh, and I'm actually just going to move this up just a couple of inches so I can draw this plane, in which now I can select the plane, use follow me command and do that. And the only reason why I lifted this up a couple of inches is otherwise this line would have ended up here like this, and it's just one more thing I have to clean up. So I just do it a little bit above, delete this, and I can move this back down. And so it's no big deal. It's more of a personal preference. It's just one thing to keep models clean. Felicia and I were talking about it before, that the idea of modeling in solids, it can be a little cumbersome at first because sometimes you're modeling differently and you're going back to try and make solids, where the more you get used to it, the more you start modeling from solids from the very beginning. uh, so it's just a different way of thinking. So from here I'm just going to kind of fill this in, uh, and then using our inferencing, you guys all know inferencing, and there's plenty of videos out there if you don't, but I can just run along this line and touch the opposite edge, and that's telling me where I want to go. And if you're not good at roof plans, doing this is really great because it tells you exactly what the roof plan wants to be. I have these lines in here, and everybody remembers my clean command. If I run that, it gets rid of those lines. And so there you go. So there's a nice, clean, solid, just very simple triangular roof. Uh, I personally like to make groups out of roofs because if I want to work on the roof, I can then just turn everything else off. So I have my reference triangle and my roof that I made, so I'm just going to hit Control G, turn those into a group, just so I can focus on groups, or focus on the roof. I'm going to make a copy of this, put it down here, and I'm actually just going to go around and see if I can make copies wherever I need them. This is going to be on my tower. And for the fun of it, even though this house is going to be all drawn with the same beam line, that's going to make it slightly more complicated. And I'm going to add a 24-inch beam, say around the back here, whatever it is, just for the fun of it. So we'll let this be at 10, this at 12, and then we have our towers and second floor. Make sense? In fact, let me just grab this and throw this on my wall group. There we go. And everybody remembers the whole copy and paste in place. So you can see why, how easy that was. In fact, let me just grab this. I'm going to cut it, go into my roof group, And so you see I have this wall sitting in my roof group. So I want it on my wall group, so I'm just going to Control X to cut it, come inside of here. If I hit Control Shift V, which is paste in place, or I believe you can do edit, paste in place, it puts it back exactly where I copied it from, regardless of axes or anything like that. It just puts it exactly where I found it. So anyway, it's just a really nice, quick, easy thing. So we're just going to go through this really quick now. It's going to be the same process as it just was. Doing this round tower here. I'm pasting in place this wall that I just copied. I'm going to erase that, so now I have my lines I can follow. I'm actually going to do one more thing that's just going to make my life a little bit easier. I'm going to try and find the center point. There we go. And what that's going to allow me to do is I can make this triangle fit exactly the size I need it to, so it's just even less work for me to do once I follow me. In fact, I'm just going to copy this and undo everything, because as you can see, if I were to do this otherwise, I have this giant hole, and I would have to fill all that in, and it's much more difficult to fill that in versus doing this kind of roof. So whenever I work on circles and all that sort of stuff, you just want to be able to get the exact roof you need. Make sense? So there's our conical roof. Oop, I'm gonna slide this down my 2 feet. So that one's sitting there. And then we'll just run through the rest of these pretty quickly. That's going to be like that. And even this here, I could do this and then fill in the center gap like we talked about before. But even let me undo this for a second. I'm going to run this, find my midpoint, go up, and now this should create a perfect hip roof for me. So if I go here and run this, you see how now that creates a perfect hip roof. Now there is this little junky thing in the middle. You just got to come in and delete it out. And then also reverse faces, move it down my 24 inches, and there's that roof. So if you have these perfectly rectangular roofs, it's always easy just to draw the center point where you actually want it to be. So even this one, I'll find this center point, come up using my references, and this one's going to be a little different since I know there's no hips per se. I'm just going to rotate that around, and now I have my perfect triangle that is both sides. Does everybody see what I did there? Pretty simple. And then I can run this. I'll run it, to the edge of my wall. And then up here, I'll just draw a line. And so to show you what I did, so I'm cutting that triangle right there. So this is my flat edge of the wall, if everybody sees that right there. And then I draw a line, and then now I can just grab this, unselect everything, and then grab this point, and now I can stretch this and fit right there. So you can see that the profile that it's making. Everybody see that, how it just fits right there on top of the roof? So now this is a perfect solid, 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 solid. Everything's solid. And so there you go. So there's, very simple type of roof. So you're saying that this is missing a line? It is. And right now, since we're, from my perspective, if we're in this design phase, I'm actually going to start talking about a more complex aspect of this pretty soon. You'll see exactly what I'm doing. But I leave these just like that for now, because ultimately, if I come back in here and say, this is the roof I want, I can use my solid tools and combine these two. And now you can see that line appears. Correct. And even ultimately, the way this roof is, I would come in here grab essentially the ring of my circle. I'm gonna hide this upper roof, so I have my tower that I can drop straight through. I'm gonna turn this into a solid, and now using my subtraction, I'm gonna subtract this tower from this roof. And now if you were to try and model this thing by hand, you know, how difficult would that be? Where now using solid commands, I definitely understand that using solid commands can be more difficult in the beginning, especially the beginning of learning how to use them. And even for me, it adds a little bit more time when I'm modeling. But in the long run, there's so many more things that I can do so much quicker and so much cleaner and so much more precise. And that's why I use them. And until, yeah, and absolutely, it is difficult to figure out what each one of these actually does, the intersect and union and subtract. And so you know, go back to that video, that I think it was that very first video that I did on solid tools, and watch it a couple of times, and even more precisely, more helpful, I have that SketchUp file that has all the different ways you can use solid tools and what happens when you use them. Just play around with it, and really it's just going to come from time. I mean, I've been using these for a couple of years now, and that's why it's really just become second nature for me. But even this wall here that I'm adding in, I can grab, I'm gonna make a copy of this upper tower. I literally just hit Control C, and just more for you guys to see, I'll do copy. And now I can do subtract from this wall. And so I can come in here and just delete out this centerpiece. Now I'm missing my upper tower, but since I copied it, I could just come and do paste in place, and I put that piece right back in. Does that conceptually make sense what I just did? Yeah, so it just becomes just doing it more and more and more, it just becomes second nature of the way that you can do things. And ultimately, this is for me what I found to be the most precise and efficient way of modeling, and why I'm preaching it. But ultimately, you got to find what's best for you. I just, from my experience, this is what it is. So even here, I can now come in and I just hit, let me undo, just show you what I did. Using my union command, this upper wall to this lower wall, there, you know, there's my beam. But I'm going to undo that because ultimately I do want to get rid of that. So there's, you know, those kinds of, that's at least this intersection back over here. Let me wait for this catch up. Back over here, you know, it's a fairly complex area, at least in a micro scale. So it was complex, but you can see how quickly we made that very clean. Now, the one other quick discussion to have from a design perspective, I'm going to create this, let me say this slightly more complex shape. We'll pull it up, and we'll say this is the shape of our house. I'm going to stretch this out just a little bit more. So say this is the shape of our house, and we're not quite sure how we want the roofs to be from a massing perspective. We don't even know true beam heights. We're just giving it a generic 10-foot ceiling right now, and we don't really even know beam heights. The exact same thing that I just did. So I'm gonna grab this triangle here that I used and say we know that we have a slope of what we want to try out. So we'll start with that slope. And I'm going to again pull this up just a couple of feet. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start finding all of my pure rectangles. So, okay, so that's rectangle. So wherever I can grab a corner and go, even if it overlaps, I'm just trying to find rectangles. So you see I have, you know, rectangle 1, I now have rectangle 2, and we'll find from here to here, it's another rectangle. And each one of these I'm turning into a group. And theoretically, I think I can do just this. So I think these two lines are touching. So even though theoretically I have my whole house covered, I actually even want to add this one. Again, even though it's overlapping, it's going to be important to draw just about every rectangle you can see. And hopefully it'll make sense in a second. So I'm going to copy this and I'll paste it into here. And just like I said before, we're going to find the easiest way we can make our hips. Run this. So we move this one down. Just for reference, I'm pulling it up 2 feet, and so I'm just copying everything back down 2 feet. So I'm going to copy this, go into this rectangle, and every time I keep saying, you know, to make it straight to the middle, it's always going to be the shortest side of the rectangle. And so you can see how quickly you can really start to make these rectangles, especially if you do the triangle shape in the proper direction. And so I'm just going to try and go through these pretty fast. So as I'm doing it, if you have any questions or not making sense what I'm doing, but you can see it's going to start getting repetitive, which is good because that will allow you to you know, more specifically see what's going on and just continue to make sense. But I think I got a couple more. I need to copy this over here. And I think I need to copy this one here, and you'll see why this long skinny triangle I made, why I made it in just a second, because without it we would actually be missing an important piece of the roof. So let me hide this one, copy this one into here. And really, roofs are one of the most complicated pieces to building a model, as I'm sure you guys have come across. But for me, ultimately, it's actually one of the most fun. Because you really start to see the building start to take shape. And it's such a complicated piece that when you really start to master it, it kind of starts impressing people in the way that you can do a lot of really fun things. This is almost a perfect square, so I just had to make sure which one was which, as to which side was my shortest dimension. And if you notice, like, I'm using my X command to go in and out of X-ray mode quite often. It's one of the most useful functions for me. Yeah. Yeah. It's such a great habit to get into, using X for X-ray mode. Yeah. So this was that long triangle, or that long rectangle. I'm going to hide it. So you can see if I didn't make it, how, you know, there would be no connection that's happening here. And maybe we don't want it, but now that I have it, especially when we're going through design with Mitch, so that, you know, we're going to sit down and he's going to sit over your shoulder and you're designing this house, I try to put all the pieces in that I think I need. And so now that I'm here at this point, you can see I very easily could have put my triangle there and ran the follow me command around this whole roof and built this whole roof pretty quickly as one complete solid. But the reason why I call this a design roof is now we can come in and start to really play with this. So maybe this roof here, we want to pop this one up. Let's even just go say 5 feet or something like that, and then we'll just come in here and from a massing perspective, we'll pull this guy up 5 feet. And maybe this one wants to match and go up just even 2 feet, and so we'll grab this pod up 2 feet. And obviously you'll see there's a lot of cleanup we'll have to do afterwards, but even just from a general massing, you can see how easily we can start to play with this. And you can still see the general pieces. So now I still have this connector piece going back here, even though we're ultimately going to get rid of it, and say, you know, this is the roof that we want. We really like this. Now I can come in, you know what, I'm going to do a quick save, and I'm going to do save copy as, and you can see that it's automatically giving, I have a 1 and a 2, and it's automatically giving me a 3, so I'm just going to go ahead and click save. And so a save copy as you can see, is creating another new file, even though once I save, you'll see the title up here, I'm still in my original 00. So that's just saving a copy, which is exactly what I want. I just want to have a reference point to go back to, because now in my roof, I'm going to say, using my solid commands, my outer shell, I'm just going to start putting all these pieces together. And so you can see all those lines go away. This is actually not touching, so this is its own separate roof. But now I have a little bit of cleanup to do, and that's fine, because now what I can do, I'm going to grab my house, like the body frame of my house, come in here and paste in place, and I'm going to use my subtraction tool and subtract out, and exactly, that's a great point. So, you know, what you're saying, that I can push and pull the walls, so let me even undo. So I'm right here, I'll paste in place my walls. And so what you're getting at is, I know that this wall needs to come out a little bit, and this wall needs to come out a little bit, and here this wall will need to come out, and this wall. Now this is going to damage my roof just a little bit, but it'll actually be easier to damage the roof, but it'll actually be easier to damage the roof and then repair it, and you'll see that in just a second. Because you'll see right here, I'm going to clip this roof that I don't necessarily want to. But now if I use my subtraction tool, I now have a very clean roof. But you see that if I turn my house back on, I need to clean this up. But just as easy, everybody loves my new command, this stretch by area, which I have as a hotkey of Alt-A for whatever reason. I can just I don't know why it's not grabbing it, but anyway, I can just grab these. I'll just do it by hand and pull this here, so you can see I just repaired that roof really easy, and I have a super clean roof throughout this whole thing. So that's my design roof. Does everybody? It's a very quick, basic look at it, but everybody get the concept of what I'm trying to get across here? Yeah, perfect. So we get rid of this, and actually, let me do a quick save. Do a save copy as, just so we have this completed version for reference. Now I'm actually going to delete all of this, and I'm going to delete you. And so now we're back to our original roof. And so now say we're a little bit further along, even if we're still designing, but we have a lot more information of what this is going to look like. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to grab the profile of my roof. For whatever reason, just consistency, I think, in my own mind, I'll offset back 5 feet from the face of the wall. So this dimension here is, you can see, is 5 feet. And if you notice, the graphics are a little different from what you're used to. This is a very old job, pre-Russell system. So now I'm just going to make a polyline, and I go from the underside of the truss line, and I'll go over typically the block, but here it's just a girder truss, but I'm going to go to the face, and then I'll go down, and this is a whole vent system and all that kind of stuff, and you can put as much detail as you want into it, but I'm only just going to go perpendicular to what would be the soffit material. Maybe it's TNG or whatever it is, and then I'll outline the fascia board and the drip edge board, and then it looks like they're doing some sort of infill block here. And you can see this is my plywood, and I'm actually going to include the plywood as well. Go all the way up to here and hit C for close. Get rid of all this. And this is my outline. And so even though it's a very simple outline, it has a lot of schematic detail, or it's a schematic outline of a lot of very specific detail. And you'll notice one of the reasons why I do put the soffit material in, which is essentially right here, is it gives me a very specific point right here. This is my beam insertion point, which is just becomes very helpful. So I was going to export this out as a new block and come into here. Oops, we'll go File, Import, New Block. And just like this whole process, maybe I won't necessarily go through the whole thing on video just because it'll start to get repetitive. This is really the exact same process we went through, except it's going to just have more information in it. So as you remember, the way we did this, I'm actually going to rotate this because I know that this is not a perfect rectangle. This is off by 4 inches. Sorry, I want to make a copy. I always like having a copy. And just like before, I'm going to raise this up just a couple of inches. And even though last time I did the infill thing, I know this one is a perfect hip. So I'm just going to make it easy on myself. Do follow me command. Do X-ray mode and just, I don't know if you see, getting rid of this line deleted out the bottom of this, because ultimately what happened, I'm going to undo. If I hit W and turn my hidden edges on, you can see that there's this thing going on. So I'm actually going to, with my hidden edges on, I'm going to select everything and run my clean command, and it's putting that back out. And for some reason, this is actually a very good lesson. I think that this is not a perfect parallel line, that something was off on this drawing, and in fact you can see it right here. You see how that was off? Because those lines should not have appeared, and you can see exactly right here, and it can really throw havoc into things. And so I can either just fix this, and now you can see I have a perfect parallel line, or easy enough, I was going to delete this roof and just fix it in here. I just need to pull this edge up to this. That's exactly right, and that's partly why instead of bringing a CAD file into SketchUp, I'll do polylines around things, because I feel like it's easier to find mistakes. Because if you're in, let me go back to CAD, the way I really should have done this is, let me offset 5 feet. I literally was just snapping to points, which can lead to errors, as you just saw. But if I were, say, at this point, and I came here, and I leave my ortho on, so I'm stuck on ortho, and I'm going to snap to this intersection so I know that's right, and I, whoops, wrong intersection, this intersection back up here, and come down and snap to the intersection of the bottom piece of my bottom chord. And if I were to come here and go to snap, you can see that there's an issue. Like I would, even if I was zoomed out, uh, you would start to see that there's an issue. If I hit to the wrong one, it would show up a lot quicker. And so that's why, going through, I think I have the floor plan open. Uh, if I, were doing this with my ortho on, you would be able to pick up things a lot quicker. That there's an error somewhere. If someone, especially when you get into odd, funky, angled houses, that things just aren't quite right. And so if you can see that if you build the roof and you get something funky in it, usually there's something wrong with your polyline to begin with. And so it's just one of those red flags to be aware of how to fix things, because there's nothing worse than finding an error way down the road that you got to repair a lot of things. So now that we have that repaired, there we go. That was much, much cleaner. And let's see if I can do this quickly enough. So this time, I know what my roof is. I'm not doing that 24-inch bump up here because that's not what this model is. Although I am going to, actually I will. I'm going to show you something real quick. So if I do this, because this is actually going to get into one of the questions that you were, whoops, I wanted to do this. One of the questions you were asking previously, Felicia, about that line that was missing. And I'll just show to you with a more complex roof, because there's going to be other little issues if you have beam height changes. Yeah, so you can see this one is raised up. I'm not going to redraw the wall. I'm just going to leave it raised up, the 24 inches. And then this one, I'm just going to find my midpoint. And then just like before, I'll hit the face of this wall, which is where my gable wants to stop. And then you can see I can just draw that same line I drew before and do this. And again, I'm still missing this line, but there's going to be a couple of issues now. So I know that this is the roof that I want, and so I can use my solid commands and I'll join these two. But you'll see that I will have one other issue, because that gets rid of that line there. And if I hide everything, everything looks great from the outside, but if I go underneath, actually no, this one really worked out well. They didn't create the issue I was originally thinking of. I was actually, I thought there was going to be some junk underneath, but what's neat is you can see that this all lines up perfectly. And if I do X-ray mode, you can see that this all joined very cleanly, and I have a nice perfect solid roof without having to go back and even build things. And just like before, if I want to take this guy, put him in here, did a copy and paste, and then doing a deletion. I didn't have this go all the way through. If you remember last time, I deleted this inner piece, and so it was a complete solid cylinder. You don't necessarily have to. All it's going to do, you can see it cut the wall through, which is fine. I can just come in here now, triple click on the interior piece, and then delete it out. So it's just two different ways of doing it. And so now, even with these eaves, so you have a much more complex roof, in literally just about the same time it took me to build a pure triangular roof, it took me to build this complex roof, or complex eave detail roof. And again, if I wanted to, a different way to throw the wall in. I'm just really creating that cut line, and there would be some sort of beam that would come back some degree. I'm just going to pull it 6 feet for right now. And there you go. So, you know, there's my roof. So hopefully, you know, you start to see why modeling in solids can actually make complex roofs even easier to deal with. Now it's to fill in or finalize my my tower. Let's see here. I think right there is my center. You know, one bad thing about teaching roofs is it starts to become a lot of repetition. I mean, it's both good in seeing it done several times, but it's just the same thing done over and over. And then use my follow me command here and drop it back down by 24 inches. And there you go. I mean, there's just that quick, you know, I think we've been talking for about half hour now, all the different roofs that I was able to build. So now let's talk about one other very important piece, you know, gable ends. Even though this doesn't have a gable specifically, a lot of times we end up with these areas here that this really would be a gable. And I'm going to show you the way I deal with gables is I essentially create a gable jig that I can copy around wherever I need to. So I'll leave this, you know, kind of cut flat just like that, and I'll build a gable jig, and I'll show you that. So this will take a little bit of setup time, but once you do it, you can build a gable anywhere in the house that you need to. I'm going to push-pull this just so I have a solid gable end just to deal with. It's just a little easier. And coming back here, going back to the same place that I pulled everything from, what I really want to deal with is this board and this board. And I'm going to W block these out. And you'll probably hear me talk a lot that once you start getting heavy into accurate 3D modeling, that you start to understand how a building goes together, because the way I try to model everything is literally how it's built, and that's how we're going to do this gable end, instead of, you know, the quick and down and dirty way. And there's no problem with this if you're in a hurry. You can actually just draw. I can copy, let's say, this line down to here, and let's fill this in. I'll do a copy, and then I'm going to actually undo everything I just did, come out of my group and paste, make that a group. And so now I have this profile, and I can pull this out, say 1.5 inches. What was this? Let me do, this is way off, 3/4 of an inch. So I'm actually going to put that back in 3/4 of an inch. So that's essentially that board that came out. And now I'll do the same thing here. I'll just copy this line down, and we'll pull this out. What is this one here? That's a crits. This is a really weird drawing, but basically another 3/4 of an inch. And that, you know, could be just that easy if you're really pressed for time. That's your gable jig, and honestly, that will probably be good enough for mostly everything you need to do. And so now, if you wanted to, you can now just copy this over to here, and we can now also mirror this and place it here, and really anywhere else that we have a gable, which I don't think we do. And now I'm going to use my solid tools and join all this, and you see that this is definitely going way further back than where my walls are. But just like before, I'm going to grab, I'm actually just going to do a quick massing group right here. Control X to cut it, come inside of here, Control V, subtraction, and that just cleaned everything up. You know, there's a perfectly drawn solid roof very easily. Even if we wanted to, say we need to come back and there's a slight redesign that the front of this house, this hip roof that we have right here, they want to make it a gable. And for whatever reason, let's say they want to keep the back end a hip. Okay, we can say easy enough. Now that these are drawn in solids, I just nickname these things I'm about to draw on my cutting boxes for obvious reasons. So I'm really just going to draw this at the midpoint. It doesn't really matter, just as long as I'm getting rid of the full hip. I'll just slide this over, and you can see I'm off a little bit, so I'll just even stretch this out. I just want to really cut this whole roof out, turn this into a solid, and cut. So just that easy, I was able to turn the hip roof into a very basic gable roof. And so I'll pull this out to a gable. And since we made a copy of our jig, I'll copy this over to here. And before I mirror it around, I'm actually just going to stretch all this up. And now we'll make a copy of this, mirror it. I think I've asked many times, but everybody knows how to mirror, right? Yeah. And so now I can just join all of this using my solid commands, and I'm going to copy this down. I want to keep this profile, but I'm actually just going to copy it down below grade so it's never seen again. But you see, if I turn everything off, like I do a hide all, you can see that it's very accessible while I'm working on my roofs, but you'll never see it when I'm here. So, you know, just that easy. I just built this detailed gable end. And again, for me, it's because of solid tools. Now, there's one other issue that we have to deal with, which is that on gable ends, this line really wouldn't be here. And so the quick way I get rid of it is I'm going to copy this angle of the line just simply because it's giving me my slope, which would be my beam. And I'm going to paste in place and then move it here. And I'm going to copy it here and mirror it back. And all what is this doing for me, it's just a quick way of getting my rake beam. So if you're ever working on roof plans and you see the tags where they talk about rake beams and whatnot, and that's what it's saying is, you know, this would be top of beam to the left is 21'2", and to the right is rake beam up. And then this side would be rake beam up, top of beam 21'2". And so I'm going to do two things with this now. If I'm going to isolate this real quick. So you see, this is just a pure triangle that has an 8-inch thickness, which would be my poured rake beam. Although I guess technically they would build a block wall like this, if that makes sense. Yeah, you know, they would basically build as much block as they could in a triangle, so that this distance would be minimum, you know, 8 to 12 inches, whatever your beam is designated at. And then they would pour all of this. So again, you know, this to me, there's really twofold in learning this process, is both advanced techniques in how to model in general, techniques in the way that I think make modeling much easier, and you learn how a building goes together. And it's just learning a lot of these little things that just make so many other things make so much more sense. But even though specifically, you know, this, let me undo, this would all technically be there, you know, we're just doing more representation, even though we're doing a very accurate representation. So I'm going to copy, I'm going to do Control C. So copy, Control C. So I'm making a copy of this. And while I still have this here, I'm just going to use my union tools and I'm going to union it into these walls. So now this is a solid wall that has my rake beam as part of my wall. So that line is now gone, correct? And if I come back to my roof, you can see that line still exists, because if I come to my roof, I'm showing the face of my block wall here. Now, if you remembered, I copied that triangle previously. So if I do Control-Shift-V for paste in place, using my negative solid tools, my subtraction, I'm gonna subtract that wall away from this roof. You know, and there's where my roof actually would be. Although, and so this would, even though this line is there, this would technically be some sort of trim board that you're really covering that up with. So that's a great question, talking about overhangs for gable ends. So this, what we did here is a zero or a minimal gable overhang, which we do a lot in span med type of stuff. If you're doing, say, more of a craftsman, then you would build this jig exactly the same way, but all I would do now is I'm going to grab my jig and I'll push it out, say 18 inches, because we're doing an 18-inch overhang, and then pull this back 18 inches. And there's my jig. It's the exact same thing, but now I have an overhang. Does that make sense? And right, and technically inside of here, if you want to look at, you know, what the section would be, if I remember correctly, there's some sort of trim board that was sitting here, and you would have your soffit material that's here, and you would have your plywood that's coming across here, and I think this trim board made, you know, these boards, and I think there was some sort of backing. This 2x here, you know, would really sit like this, and my wall, I would essentially have an 8-inch wall here. Like, I'm going to reverse this, make this a blue face. Yeah, so this would be my 8-inch block wall, and so this would be a 2x, and I was actually going to turn that into a group, because I would actually do a 2x here, and that's kind of like a ledger that would run down, and this intermediate piece here, let me see, I'm going to see if I can, I'm going to try and do something real quick. So what I'm trying to hollow this out so I can show you how it would be built. So if that makes sense, so this is a blocking that would run down. This is blocking that would run down, and then you would actually have these guys, which is essentially like a 2x. Let's make it like a 2x4 here. That would just get cut by whatever angle this is. Actually, I take that back. They wouldn't cut it. They would actually rotate it. Like that. Oops, I made the wrong 4 inches. So then this would sit inside of here, and there would be a series of those going down like every 16 inches or whatever it is. And if I did a quick section, that's how the gable would be built. Does that make sense? You know, so that's if you're actually building a gable versus, you know, which is what the you know, what this is. So we're blocking everything out, or you're doing a zero overhang gable, which is literally just putting the truss up to the edge and then trimming it out. So that's really the two ways that you can make gables. And I hope, from this right here is actually, a fairly complicated piece of roof with all these trims and the way they're all working together, creating a gable. But you saw like just how quick it can be done. And even though I'm hoping I make this all look easy, it definitely takes a little bit of practice. It's just one of those things that the more you do it, the more you start to understand. And even if we're not specifically drawing every 2x4 of how it's being built, if you start thinking about how is this built, it really starts to make sense as to why we're doing the things we do. And if it just brings up questions, like even just going over to Brian and be like, hey, how is this gable built? How are they actually building it? Even though you're not going to model every piece of it, you can start understand why you're putting lines in a particular place. So that's that's roofs. There's not really a whole lot more to it. You can obviously know that your houses can get much more complicated, but really it's the same set of skills that you're going to use repetitively over and over on top of it to make your complex roofs using these same set of skills. And so from here, even if I, I'm just going to leave this gable, even though it's not what it's supposed to be for now. I'll leave it. But you can see that if they wanted to go back to a hip, I can just make what I call my my cutting box, as long as it's bigger than my roof. Maybe I'll just make a copy of my roof sitting over here in space if we want to look at options. 100 feet over, and then I'm going to trim that so I have a nice clean edge again. And I just need to push-pull this to my center point, and I'll rotate this one, and using my solid tools, just do a quick join, and there's my hip roof again. And then this piece, since I'm copying my roof over, I'm going to copy this over. There's two ways just to start thinking about solids. The quick and easy way, really, this is just, I'm going to draw a line, delete that, and I can push-pull this, and then run my clean command, get rid of those things. But you can also, if you want to just start practicing with solid tools, you can just draw this box that goes up over it, turn it into a group, and clean that up. So as always, there's just like 100 different ways of doing anything, and it's really going to come down to what's most comfortable for you to do. And for me, it really is just, I start thinking in these solid tools way, and it just makes a lot of things easier in my mind. So that's yeah, I mean that's roofs. Any questions on roofs? I mean, really, it's just gonna come back to you guys just practicing it and doing it. And I know, Felicia, you started off saying that, drawing your roofs, it was taking you a lot of time to go back and turn them into solids. And it definitely would. And I get where you're coming from. And Leron, you weren't here in the beginning when Felicia and I were talking, but what I was telling her is that if you're working on a project, ideally you guys are all getting up to this level because I think you see how quick and easy it can be. But if you need to get the job out, you get the job out. That's the most important piece to this whole process, is you're trying to develop a skill set that makes you fast to be able to do what you need to do in the time frame you need to do it in. And right now, solid tools may not be that, but it's so as you're working, some things maybe you do solids and some things you're not. It's just the next time you do another model, you challenge yourself to do something else that's solids, or you challenge yourself to do something else that's a little different. And so you're kind of balancing between your fastest way of drawing and adding in these new levels of pieces that could make you even faster in the long run. Does that make sense? Yeah. I mean, so really, ultimately, it's You just got to find your way through this world. I'm trying to give you all the tools I possibly can and the experiences I've had, and from that you develop your skill set. Um, yeah, so I know that really wasn't much of a question, but any other questions? Yeah, so start adding roofs to your model, and um, if you guys have any questions during the week or whatever that you're doing your roofs, obviously feel free to let me know and we can troubleshoot, because it's just going to come down to practicing it. All right. All right. Anything else? Awesome. Thanks, guys, and good luck with your models, and looking forward to see how yours are coming out. All right. Bye, guys.